Hi, thanks for joining us today and welcome to our Intro to Yoga series. So today we're going to be talking about the history, literature, and philosophy of yoga. And we could spend a whole lifetime talking about this, but to keep it condensed, we'll just give you a brief overview of some of the key points.
So yoga started, people say, about 5,000 years ago. They give that number because they reference some text from an ancient Indian civilization. And the text revolved around that, or called the Vedas. Back in that time, there was also a sister science to yoga called Ayurveda, and we'll have a whole other video about that. But a lot of the literature and topics were passed down verbally, or some were written down on palm leaves and passed down that way. And from that time, a lot of the yoga philosophy has been revolved around spirituality and evolving and becoming one with your higher self. And for the majority of that time, it's been men separated from society in caves, meditating and doing odd practices. So we'll discuss a little bit more about that. But over that period of time, there's been teachers and guides trying to share the wisdom and information and routes, as you would call it, of ways to reach enlightenment. And within those guides, there's two concepts that are used, and both of them come around a similar idea of we are a soul in a body. There's dualism between those two things of we're all just one being, or you're a soul and a body and they're separate things. And within that concept of we are a soul in a body, there are two ideas that I refer to as dualism and not non-dualism. Dualism meaning that there are two separate parts of that higher being. There's a Godhead figure, and then there's all of us, everyone else, we're separate. And the non-dualism meaning that we're all just one being. We may see separate parts of it, but we're all similar things. Just like my finger is different from my toe, but it's all part of my body. So within those brief concepts of the philosophy, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth, a lot of the literature revolves around explaining that. So some of the older literature that is discussed and talked about are the Vedas, and a lot of them are lost, meaning they're just either destroyed because of time from when they weren't written down, or some of the verbal accounts were just lost due to time. The other ones are the Upanishads, and the more recent you get, the more of the literature that you have. Another more recent one is the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and that's when we start seeing some postures, some of the Asana postures that we see in all yoga classes or most yoga classes today. Sort of starts around that time. That's not that long ago. And there's another important book, the Srimad Bhagavatam, really all explaining guides towards reaching enlightenment, living your life in a way that allows that to occur. There's two more books that really go into the depth of the philosophy of the yoga culture, and not necessarily just the culture, but the way you live your life in a yogic way. I guess that is culture and lifestyle. So the two that we're going to talk about in a little bit more depth and use their concepts to help explain a lot of the philosophy of yoga are the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita. The Yoga Sutras were written, they say, by one person, Patanjali. It's believed that it's really a group of people put together, and all these ideas were put together, and that's the name that was given to the author for it. Those gathered or put together about 2,000 to 2,500 years ago, so it's said. The other one we're going to talk about is the Bhagavad Gita, and that is a short snippet from a larger epic tale, the Mahabharata. And in that long epic tale, there's a battle, and right in the middle of the battle, there's this little clip that is the Gita. That is a major text in Hinduism and has a lot of life experience, not life experience, but explanation of how to live in a true way. So I'm going to pass it over to Carly to explain some stuff from the Yoga Sutras.
So one path of yoga that most people are familiar with is Ashtanga, the 8-limbed path of yoga. And within that, there are 8 limbs. And the first two are related to our physical being. So the Yamas are restraints, and the Niyamas are observances. So these are kind of guidelines or recommendations, if you will, to purify and maintain the body so that and lifestyle, so that you're able to reach those higher states of consciousness. So the Yamas are, and I'll say the Sanskrit word, and I may mispronounce it, and then I'll speak a little bit about what they mean. So the first one is Aparigraha.
Aparigraha. Always go the other way.
Okay.
Go that way.
So this is non-possessive. Ahimsa means non-violence. Satya means truthfulness. Asteya means non-stealing. And Brahmacharya means non-excess. So at first glance, that can seem pretty basic, but I was reading that it's if you, I used to read the Bible a lot, and there was, people would say that every time you read it, it's something different, and I think that's true for many spiritual texts. And same is true even with just looking at the Yamas and Niyamas. Every time you look at them, you can kind of glean something different. So even just looking at non-possessive, that could mean not being possessive of a person's time, or not being possessive in regards to holding on to an old grudge, or just wanting to kind of hoard stuff for yourself. So ahimsa, non-violence. So most of us are pretty non-violent, I would say. We're not holding a gun to someone's head. However, if you look more subtly, violence can also be seen in the way that we speak to ourselves, the way that we speak to other people, the way that we yell at people in our cars. Truthfulness is pretty self-explanatory, but when we look deeper, where are those places that we may not be truthful even within ourselves? What are we lying to ourselves about? Non-stealing. So most of us, again, don't probably, go to the gas station and steal a candy bar or something. However, one thing that we talked about in my yoga teacher training was not stealing people's time. And I thought that was really interesting concept, because when we're late to something, or we're just kind of blabbing on to somebody, it's are we stealing their time? Are we taking something that's not ours to take? And I think you can look at that in a lot of different ways of where are we taking what's not ours to take? Even just taking on someone else's burden, if it's not yours to take, don't steal that from them. And then Brahmacharya, non-excess. So I think that, again, is self-explanatory, but looking on that deeper level of where can I clean out my pantry? Where can I clean out my closet so that I don't have this excess stuff that's just kind of accumulating physically, as well as mentally. Is there an excess thought that's going on that's causing you discord? Where can I release that excess thought? So those are the Yamas, and I think they can definitely mean something different for every person. And next are the Niyamas, so the observances, and I may have them out of order, but the first one that I'll say is Saucha, or purity. Santosha, meaning contentment. Tapas, self-discipline. Svadhyaya, self-study. And this one is
Ishvara Pranidhana.
Is surrender to God. So we'll just kind of look briefly at these. So Saucha meaning purity. So I think that can be purity in what we consume physically for our body, purity of thought, purity of our words that we speak to others. Contentment. So finding contentment, finding satisfaction in what is versus like wanting to reach for more and more and more. Tapas was the one that I focused on in my yoga teacher training, self-discipline. So tapas actually means fire, and it's been described as purification through heat. And it doesn't necessarily mean like sweating or sitting in a sauna, but meaning holding that tension, like the fire of tension or the discomfort, like sitting in the fire. If you've ever been in an uncomfortable situation and you've bared through it, then that is sitting in the fire. And it's like if you're noticing new patterns that are like rubbing up against, creating friction or heat with old patterns, sitting through that and learning from that experience versus like just trying to run out of it.
Also, that's where austerities come into play. So you'll see yogis that say they hold their arm up all the time. They're taking these extreme austerities to purify themselves for their enlightenment. And that's where a lot of that draws from that, the tapas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Svadhyaya, the self-study. So self-awareness, always key. And then finally, surrender to God or to a source that's greater than yourself. And a lot of things like throughout yoga literature, really everything just boils down to like do all these things, and then if all else fails, just surrender to God, surrender to the universe, surrender to source. So those are, if most people in modern day think of yoga only as postures, like I'm going to a yoga class to move my body, but the yamas and the niyamas come first. That those are the foundation of the 8 limb path. So I think that is important to recognize as our modern day society. I think these are a beautiful way to live your life in a moral and holistic way. So next on the 8 limb path is asana or postures, which we're very familiar with. Next is pranayama, breath work, and we'll have a separate video on asana and breath work. And then next is pratyahara, or sense withdrawal. So this is when we start to move into a meditation where we're trying to let go of all of our senses that are kind of keeping us here in this realm. And so we try to we will always have those senses, but we're withdrawing them, or we're going internally rather than externally. So these 3, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara, are a bridge between the physical and the cosmic realms. So then we move into the next 3. Yeah, I was like, wait, that's 8, right? Is dharana, which means concentration. So binding the mind to one place or one concept. And the example I like to give here is watching one candle. So your sole focus is on just looking at the flame. And then next is dhyana, or absorption. So this is where, you can kind of see it's like a trickle. So pratyahara is the sense withdrawal. Dharana is the concentration on one thing. And then dhyana is the absorption. So you're fully absorbed within yourself, and you feel that extension of unity with all that is. And then going down further next is samadhi, or liberation and bliss. This is also a surrendering to source, to all that is. And these last 3, the dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, are part of the soul. So it kind of moves through the levels of the yamas and niyamas, or the physical, The Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara are the bridge between the physical and the higher realms. And then the last three are focused more on the soul and the eternal aspect of our being.
And that's just a small section of the Yoga Sutras. There's 4 main books in the Yoga Sutras, and the last 2 are all about once you start reaching that samadhi, all this other stuff that comes. And for a lot of the texts, there are many different translations. So for the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita, there are a lot of translations, and they explain it in different ways. The explanation that Carly gave is going to be different from an explanation someone else will give, and they're not that one's wrong. They're just 2 different ways of looking at the spiritual path. Next, I'm going to talk about the Bhagavad Gita, and the Gita is a conversation with 2 characters in a story, and one is a prince, and he's going into battle, and the other one is his charioteer, who at this time decides to tell him that he is God. It's a fun thing. It's like, hey, by the way, I'm God. And he helps the other character, Arjuna, understand his discomfort with going and killing his cousins and his family members who they're at war with. And within the Bhagavad Gita, there's a lot of discussion. Every individual line has so much meaning and power to it. But within it, it describes Krishna, or the Godhead figure, describes 3 paths for enlightenment, for that fulfilling your purpose in this world, in this lifetime. And he discussed 3 things: karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. So we often hear about all these different styles of yoga, especially in America, and a lot of them refer to a physical style, physical practice, a way of moving your body. This is more of the spiritual path, that way to live your life into that enlightenment state. So the first one I'm going to talk about is karma yoga. We hear karma, it's like karma will get you in the end, but that's not really what we're talking about. Karma yoga is the idea of selfless service, of you live and you work and you do your service without an expectation of any gain in return. So your whole service is selfless service, or action of doing stuff for the divine. The next one I'm going to talk about is jnana yoga, and that's yoga of the mind, or knowledge. And I think, in the story, Krishna said that's one of the hardest, because you're trying to gain realization and enlightenment through study, through understanding mentally, and being in physical bodies and physical beings with our restrictions. It's hard for us to perceive a lot of those concepts that are otherworldly, and to gain that liberation when we're trapped in our bodies. And the third one is bhakti yoga. And bhakti is the yoga of devotion, the yoga of love. And they say it's the easiest, because all you have to do is just, everything you do is in devotion to God, and in a loving way. And he often says, as if no matter what you do, just do everything in devotion to me and you're good. That's an overly simplified version of what it said in the Gita. But all of these, especially Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita, there are many translations. And I always encourage people to find one that resonates with them, because there's going to be a way of writing or a style of language that allows you to understand and connect with the teachings behind it. And the teachings behind it are all the same, no matter what the translation comes out to. That underlying point is all the same. And also, there's the idea within the Gita, I believe it said in the Gita, of the qualities of the soul, because we talk about we are a soul with a body. And there are 3 qualities of the soul that we like to talk about: Sat, Chit, Ananda. And there are three important things of our soul is eternal. It never ends. It is full of truth. It has access to all truth, all divine knowledge and truth at all times. And it is full of bliss. So we are always blissful. Our natural state is eternal, full of truth, and full of bliss. And that's what all of these texts are trying to help us understand and realize. A lot of the texts and a lot of these paths and guides are just that, are guides that someone has experienced and is trying to share that knowledge to allow us to reach that enlightenment, that liberation ourselves. And it's a long journey. So if you want to hear more about specific topics about history or philosophy or some of the literature, let us know. We're also going to have a number of other videos in this series talking about the physical practice or asana, our pranayama breathwork, some meditation, some of the energy body, and we're going to have one about Ayurveda. So stay tuned for all those, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. Namaste.
Bye. Namaste.